There is no greater tragedy in this world than a man who dies at 25 but isn't buried until he's 75. You've met him. He's everywhere. Eyes dim, spine slouched, a voice that once dreamed loud now whispers with regret. He walks not with purpose but with permission, granted not by his soul but by his surroundings. And maybe, just maybe, that many know, before you turn away from this moment, before your mind tries to protect you with excuses, listen carefully to this truth. No, you are not living. You are surviving. You were not born merely to endure the passing of days. You were born to ignite them. When I walked the path of discovery, I met many men and women who had everything, titles, wealth, comfort, yet behind their polished smiles lived empty spirits. Why? Because they lacked a definiteness of purpose. They did not choose their life. They inherited it, followed it, settled for it. Let me tell you something. No man can live fully if he walks a path he did not pave himself. I once sat across from a man, calloused hands, weathered face. He told me, Mr. Hill, I work 16 hours a day and still feel like I'm dying inside. I asked him one question that silenced the room, sir, and what do you burn for? He couldn't answer. And that, my friends, is the first death of the soul. Now, let me share something most never will. DeBrant, every adversity you've suffered, every betrayal, loss, or heartbreak, Doc Blackman, wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Yes, pain has its purpose. It is not the enemy. It is the raw material of strength. Like steel must endure the furnace, so too must you, your disappointments. They weren't meant to destroy you, they were meant to forge you, but what do most people do? They wait for the fear to go away, wait for the perfect time, wait until it's safe. Let me be plain, Sharon, there is no perfect time, there is only now, and the fear, it never disappears. But you must act in spite of it. That is courage. That is the birthplace of a full life. And so I ask you right now, in the silence of your own heart, burdened, are you alive? Or are you simply not dead? What idea have you suffocated with doubt? What love have you withheld out of fear? What dream have you buried under logic and opinions? It is not too late. But I will tell you this. Time is not waiting for you. It is not slowing down. Every second you hesitate, dip, someone else is building, someone else is daring, someone else is living fully. So I say to you, build your life like a man possessed, get a clear purpose, turn your pain into power, step into fear, dare greatly, and let the world know I was here. Yeah. And I lied today. Because the greatest sin is not failure, it's playing small. Now go, make your decision, and never live half dead again. Live fully, starting now. There is a kind of death that does not come with a funeral. It doesn't arrive with mourning or eulogies or flowers. It comes quietly, silently. It creeps into the soul of a man while he still breathes, and it robs him of the very thing that makes life worth living, his purpose. I have seen it more times than I cared to count. A man wakes up each morning not out of excitement, but obligation. He puts on the same clothes, drives the same route, performs the same tasks, day after day, year after year, not because he chooses to, but because he no longer remembers he can choose. He trades his fire for routine, his imagination for compliance, his vision for a paycheck. And somewhere in the depths of his soul, a light begins to dim this man. He doesn't fall. He fades. Do you know what I call that? That is the silent death of a life unlived. I once stood on a street corner in New York City, watching the rush of feet and folded brows. People moved fast, as though urgency meant direction, but I saw no joy in their eyes, no spark, no light. They weren't rushing towards something they loved. They were running from the silence, from that awful question that comes when the noise stops merriment. Is this all there is? One of the greatest illusions in this world is that time is abundant, that tomorrow will wait patiently for you to wake up, that dreams will sit on your shelf like untouched books, ready whenever you finally feel brave enough to open them. But let me tell you, dreams decay, not overnight, but slowly, silently. You don't notice when it starts. You just wake up one day, and the music in your chest is gone. There was a young man I once mentored. Bright eyes, strong mind. He had a dream to build something that would change the world. But he said to me, "Mr. Hill, maybe I'll start next year. I just want to play it safe." I saw then that subtle fear disguising itself as practicality, and I warned him, "Safety is a beautiful cage, son." "But it's still a cage." He nodded, smiled politely. Apperson returned to the life expected of him. 10 years later, I met him again. The fire was gone. He had wealth, a family, and a fine reputation. But his words broke my heart. A man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder, tossed by the waves, turned by the wind, and bound for nowhere. You may possess education, talent, connections, or even luck, but without definiteness of purpose, you will be a leaf in the storm, blown this way and that, never reaching a destination, never building a legacy. When I wrote Think and Grow Rich, I interviewed the most powerful minds of my generation: Carnegie, Edison, Ford, Rockefeller. Do you know what every one of them had in common? They knew exactly what they wanted, not vaguely, not someday, not when conditions were perfect. They had absolute clarity, and they pursued it like their soul depended on it, because it did. I recall sitting with Mr. Andrew Carnegie, the man who challenged me to devote 20 years of my life to a mission I did not fully understand at the time. He looked at me with steely eyes and said, "Oh, young man, if you cannot tell me what you want most out of life in one sentence, the world will never take you seriously." That struck me like lightning. He was right. Because when you don't have a definite aim, life will make you a servant of those who do. You will labor for other people's dreams. You will follow other people's orders. You will end up climbing a ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. And yet the tragedy is, most people spend more time planning a weekend than they do designing their life. They let the world tell them who to be: parents, teachers, society, social media. And the voice within, that sacred whisper of destiny, grows quieter with each compromise. I want to speak to you. Not the role you play, not the mask you wear, but the part of you that dreams when no one is watching. What do you want? Not what do you think you can get left, but what do you desire with all your heart? There is power, real, immeasurable power, in deciding. When a man decides with certainty, when he backs it with faith and relentless action, the entire universe begins to shift around him. I have seen men with no education become giants of industry. I've seen poor boys from coal towns rise to heights that even kings would envy, not because they were lucky, but because they chose a definite goal and bent the world to meet it. Clarity is magnetic. Purpose attracts people, opportunities, energy, and momentum. It is the first step in every great transformation. When you walk through life without it, every obstacle feels like a defeat. But when your purpose is clear, obstacles become stepping stones because you are going somewhere. I know that may be hard to hear when you're in the middle of it, when the bills are piling up, when betrayal has left you breathless, when your dream feels farther away than ever before. But I tell you this not from theory. I tell you from experience, from watching broken men rise higher than giants. Because they faced the fire and walked through it. You see, there is a universal law I've come to understand. Shrillendor, every setback carries with it the seed of an equal or greater advantage. But you must train your eyes to see it. You must train your heart to endure for long enough to uncover it. The difference between those who rise and those who stay buried is not in circumstance. It's in perception. Two men can face the same storm. One curses the wind, the other builds a sail. Adversity is the great separator. If it strips away the excuses, the comfort, the softness. It reveals your character or the lack of it. You know, I remember a man named Tom, a steel worker in Pennsylvania, who lost his job when the mills shut down. He came to me broken, ashamed, his family barely scraping by. He said, "Mr. Hill, I've lost everything." And I looked at him and said, "Then now is the perfect time to build something real." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" You know, I told him what I'll tell you, Cinderant. When life knocks you to the floor, it also hands you a blueprint, not of ruin, but of reinvention. Tom went on to start a small welding shop in his garage. It wasn't easy. He worked 16 hours a day, ate beans and rice for months, failed again and again. But he never let adversity define him. He let it refine him. 10 years later, he owned a manufacturing plant and employed over 100 men who had once stood in his same shoes. Ina, understand this pain is potential in disguise. When life tests you, it is not to punish you, but to prove you, to shape you into someone worthy of the dream you say you want. Would you hand a sword to a man untrained in battle? No. He must be tested, tempered. So too with your dream. You want success? Then be ready to be tested. Be ready for late nights, lost friends, failures that bruise your pride and shake your confidence. Because life is asking you one simple question: how bad do you really want it? I have never known a single successful man, truly successful, who did not first walk through hardship. It is in those dark moments when you are face down in the dirt that something deeper. Fear is the most subtle and destructive enemy a man will ever face. It wears many masks. It disguises itself as caution, as logic, even as humility, but make no mistake, it is fear, and it is robbing you of your life. Every great man I've studied, interviewed, or walked beside, every single one felt fear. Do not believe the lie that courage means the absence of fear. Courage means taking the step while your knees still shake. I remember I remember standing before my first major lecture, my notes trembling in my hand, sweat dripping from my brow, a voice in my head screaming, "You're not ready." But then another voice rose inside me, not louder, but deeper. It said, "Wrong. Do it anyway." And that has become my battle cry. Not do it when you're ready. Not do X when you're confident, but do it anyway. Fear is a liar that waits at the threshold of every dream worth chasing. It will tell you you're not smart enough, not strong enough, not connected enough, not young enough, not old enough. And if you believe it, you'll stay stuck in a life that is safe, small, and suffocating. I once asked a dying man, "What do you regret most?" He didn't mention money, fame, or even love lost. He said this: "Rent. I regret all the times I said no when I wanted to say yes." Those were the moments fear won. You must understand, fear feeds on hesitation. Every time you shrink back, it grows stronger. But every time you move through it, even by 1 inch, it loses its grip. Do you know why most people never build the life they dream of? Because they are waiting to feel ready. They are waiting for permission. They are waiting for guarantees. But life does not hand out guarantees. It only rewards the bold, the ones who act in spite of uncertainty, who leap before the net appears. I recall the story of a young woman who wanted to become a speaker. She told me, "Mr. Hill, I'm terrified of standing in front of people." I smiled and said, "Good. Then that is exactly what you must do. Because what you fear most often marks the very gate you must walk through to reach your greatness." Fear is not a signal to stop. It is a signpost showing you that you're on the edge of something powerful, something transformational. It is the threshold between the life you know and the life you're meant for. I want you to think right now about the one thing you've been avoiding, the phone call you haven't made, the business you haven't started, the truth you haven't spoken. Not because it's impossible, but because you're afraid. And let me ask you, what is fear costing you? No. Every time you surrender to it, you trade a piece of your future for a fragment of comfort. And in the end, comfort is a poor companion. It never built empires. It never wrote Books. It never changed the world. Fear will whisper, stay small, stay quiet, stay safe. But your soul, your deepest self, will whisper something far greater. Grand move now. There comes a moment in every life when the mirror grows heavy. You know, when you look at your reflection, not the one others see, but the one you know deep inside, and you ask the most terrifying question of all, Surreal. Is this the life I chose, or the one I settled for? You know, it is in that moment that the truth speaks, and it speaks not in anger, but in honesty. It says, riddle. You have been existing, not living. You see, most people do not choose their life. They inherit it. They fall into routines handed down by their parents, their culture, their education system, and before they know it, they're trapped in a life they never consciously designed. They drift, wake up, go to work, watch the clock, come home, numb the pain, repeat. Read 3. But I tell you now, and hear me well, you were not made to drift. You were made to decide, to rise each morning with intention, to chart your own course, to live with such fierce clarity that the world cannot ignore your presence. I once asked a man in his 60s what his greatest desire was. He looked at the ground, swallowed hard, and said, to go back and live my life like I meant it. My friends, don't let that be your story. Do not wait for retirement or for permission or for some mystical sign in the sky to begin. The time is not later. It is not next year. It is not when the kids are older, when the debt is paid, or when fear finally leaves. The time is now, right now. As you listen to my words, there are doors opening in your mind. Ideas stirring, dreams you buried long ago knocking again on the walls of your heart. They have waited patiently, but they will not wait forever. To live deliberately means to stop postponing your power. It means waking up each day and asking widder and cell, what am I building? What impact am I making? What does my soul long to create? It doesn't mean you need all the answers. It doesn't mean you need to know how it ends. It means you start with what you have right now. You take the first step and trust that the path will rise to meet your feet. Living deliberately is not about chasing more. It's that, I